Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Shri Yukteswar, our beloved Guru Deva, Paramahansa Yoganandaji, saints of all religions, friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, we lovingly bow before you all. Divine Mother, great masters, be with us always. Help us to stay centered in a place of deep calmness, knowing that in calmness we will find true love, and through that love find our way back to you. Help us to make conscious choices, to not be tossed around by the ups and downs in the world or by others' feelings about us, but rather to stay in our center, in peace, calmness, love, and joy. Om, peace. Amen. Let's meditate together now for just a few minutes. Taking the words of this song in, right into our heart. We chant it so often that it would be easy to not hear and experience the words, the meaning, the call to God. I'm keeping my heart open. Please come to me. Om, peace, Shanti, Amen. I know I was supposed to be deep in meditation, but I just had this thought because 2 weeks ago when I was speaking, I talked about how often we use these words delusion and illusion, and it's much harder than it sounds. We say it so often. Everything in life is a delusion or an illusion, and we were talking about other people hurting our feelings and, what is real in life. It's sort of like what you think of me is none of my business, and I mentioned that book 2 weeks ago. And so much has happened in my life in the last 2 weeks because I had to watch that talk from 2 weeks ago, which I never do. I rarely watch a talk that I've given, and even in this series. But every once in a while when there's a second week, it feels important because I don't remember what I said. And I was looking at that talk, and I had a lot of hair. I have very long hair. You may notice I have very little hair now. That's one change. But I recorded that talk the night before a surgery that I had. I was in so much pain, not while I gave the talk. I didn't experience a moment of pain, but my whole experience of life was so dramatically different than it is now because the surgery was a success, and I really feel pretty good, and I'm up and I'm walking and not hobbling around, and well, I'm not in pain. I mean, that's huge. And I thought, life is just so, this is totally relevant to this topic, which is what brought it to mind, I'm sure. But I was not here, but the church, in the temple 2 weeks ago, and my experience in the world for about 2 weeks was simply of pain. I could hardly get out of it, except when I was speaking to all of you 2 weeks ago. And that felt so real. It's hard to say, oh, that wasn't real. And now this feels so real, and I'm not in any pain. And I feel great, and I got my hair cut, and I feel lighter and uplifted. It's just sort of, it's so silly, but it's so exactly the truth. Like, what is real? What will we react to outside of the essence of what's going on within? That's what's real. That's what we want to keep moving from, and not reacting, but acting in the world from, coming into the world with, because nothing else that's going on in a moment, it's this or it's that, and it just changes so quickly. But what's in here doesn't change. And it is very challenging, even in those simple ways. It is fascinating that whenever I've been in pain, which hasn't been a lot in my life, but it's sort of all been crammed into this last 9 months for some reason. Most of the pain that I've experienced, dental abscesses, stingray stings, ruptured discs, it's like, oh, come on. But you know, through all of it, I've been teaching a lot or giving Sunday services, and when I'm doing that, I'm not in pain. It speaks volumes, actually. So it just caught my attention. And it's a very meaningful aspect of life to notice as we're talking about this topic of hurt feelings. I started the talk 2 weeks ago saying something about this, but I actually want to be a little more clear about it. This is a unique topic, this hurt feelings, because everything else we've talked about, and I've just done a quick glance at some of the emotions that we will talk about, they're feelings that are coming from within more. Not that there aren't reasons in the things in the world, experiences, circumstances that could bring about depression, but depression, anxiety, unkind thoughts, these are things that come from within us. But hurt feelings, everybody gets their feelings hurt. It's just a common, universal experience. I found this. I don't remember where I found this now. So where I was reading about this topic, but I found this saying by Patanjali. So the father of all yoga, the bearer of the essence of wisdom. Patanjali just cut it down, no fat. It was so lean and so right to the point that I think for many of us, until Swamiji wrote his commentary on Patanjali's teachings, not that many years before he died, most of us couldn't understand Patanjali. It was like reading truth, like biblical, Jesus speaking. Like, what does that mean? But here's either what he said or how Swamiji interpreted it. I don't know. But he said, why be personal? Meaning, why get personally involved? Why look at anything in the world as if it actually has to do with not just that person, but even with yourself in some ways? Why be personal is a huge statement. He's saying, lift yourself up out of the ego and live in the world of your soul. That's what matters. And then he didn't say all that. I said all that. He said, why be personal? But it's a big statement to grasp. But then he says, everyone in this world will hurt you. Consciousness is what matters. Isn't that amazing? I just want to read it again because this is Patanjali speaking. He watched his words very carefully, or if it was in Swamiji's interpretation. Swamiji was never careless, or masters, Yoganandas. These were not beings who were, every word mattered. They knew just what they were saying. Everyone in this world will hurt you. Consciousness is what matters. So it's an extraordinary beginning for this topic. It will happen. And our job is to bring the teachings in or begin to prepare ourselves to be ready for that, because otherwise that delusion gets us. We actually think that that person's hurting us. We actually think that they're doing something that's making us feel terrible. And it's very real in the moment. I want to share with you an experience I had just this morning with my partner. Again, I've said this many times, but I share these stories because it allows all of us, first of all, to see how simple truth is. And the truth is always there to be tapped into. And tapping into it will always prevail when we're looking to raise our consciousness, because consciousness is what matters. So my husband and I have been going through these months of challenges because we've both had back issues. And it's led to many sleepless nights, and we've been really good to each other, which, as most of you will know, not always easy. But we've been really good to each other given how challenging life has been. We've really made the best of it and had some very close time. But last night, I really wanted to sleep through the night because, well, was giving this talk. I had a busy day today. Tomorrow we have our 8-hour meditation, trying to store sleep so I'll be awake and ready tomorrow. And Sunday night, I'm doing a satsang for some people in Arizona. It's a pretty busy weekend for me, given that I haven't been doing very much in this way. So he tried to wake me up because he couldn't sleep. And I said, I don't want to wake up. And he said, you know, I'm not feeling great. And I said, I don't want to wake up. There were about 2 more attempts on his part, but I was steadfast in my desire to sleep. So I did. I slept. And I got up, as I always do, very early in the morning, at which point he was sound asleep. And I went downstairs, I meditated, and I worked a little bit. And I came up to wake him up. And he, in a way that felt mean to me, that's my perspective. He swears was not the case, so there you have it. The beginning of what's truth and what isn't. He teased me about not being willing to be there for him. And it was one of those edgy kinds of teases. Oh yeah, here's the woman who always says, if you need me anytime, just wake me up, or just, you know. Now, mind you, I'm a very good sleeper and he is not, so I have been awakened most nights in the last 2 months, and I've been willing. But I wasn't last night. And I found myself sitting on the edge of the bed, because I'd come to awaken him, crying. I didn't cry out loud. I don't even think he knew I was crying because he was half asleep. But in my mind, I just thought, why is he being so mean to me? I've been there every night for him. I have been, and I did my list, taking care of this, taking care of that, doing this, doing that. And he's being so mean. And I wanted to be recognized for what I had done. You know, in the world, not unusual. There were a couple of other things that happened that in these 10 minutes, to me, felt equally mean. But by the time he was up, his first words to me, when we then ran into each other downstairs or in the study or something, why are you being so mean to me? That's what he said to me. I didn't say it to him. I said, I'm not being mean to you. And then I saw where we go. I was just about to tell him, you hurt my feelings. You, in fact, were the one who was mean. Then I said to myself, do you actually think he's going to hear that? How many times have you been right at this juncture? How many times? So I said to myself, don't go there. So I just got dressed, I left, and when I got to the temple this morning, I said to myself, you have got to practice meaning, not practice as if I don't love him, I love him, but practice loving him all day today, because otherwise I could go home and there would be a fight. We all know these places. Later you think, what in the world were we fighting over? But we would fight. He would tell me I was terrible to him. And I would do everything I could do to prove to him that he was terrible to me. Do you hear it? So I just refused to go there. I just practiced loving him. We came together in the middle of the afternoon. I said, whatever happened this morning, it wasn't worth anything. We have so much going on, and we've been so good to each other. Let's just put it down. He didn't really want to talk to me. So, take 2. Now was I going to try and tell him how terrible he was being? You know, this is a very common way that this goes. And then he left from my house to go to his house. And I sat down and I wrote him an email filled with love about how wonderful we've been to each other, about how important it was to stay there because we're still going through a lot, how easy it would be to get off track. But I said how trivial this is. This is nothing in our world filled with love. Now, I haven't heard back from him, but it's a practice. It's a practice, and it presents itself. Again, I often tell this story. It's like the story du jour, because there's so many stories. It happens constantly, and we have to watch ourselves. You know, the second reading on this topic, remember last week, it's important. I want to just flip back for just one moment and say last week it was the secret of overcoming hurt feelings is to expect nothing of others. Thus, their words and actions will always find you inwardly at peace. We spoke a lot about that last week, and you can see it's not exactly what happened for me today. But, I mean, it did, I eventually got there. Eventually means within minutes. But it wasn't where I was. It's not like I'm just living there. I cried. Then I wanted to tell him while he was wrong. I had to go through that for 20 minutes maybe. Then Swamiji says the second week, the secret of overcoming hurt feelings is to direct your attention outward in giving yourself to others instead of dwelling self-centeredly on your expectations of them. That's very powerful. It happens all the time to all of us. Just listen to the words again. These are such simple little bits that Swamiji put out, but so deep. The secret of overcoming hurt feelings is to direct your attention outward in giving yourself to others instead of dwelling self-centeredly on your expectation of them. You know, the nature of the human condition, literally, is to want to be emotional. It's to want to go to that emotional, reactive place. It's just part of this condition. Many of you have heard me say, I've had a lot of talks with God where I've said to him, this is so unfair. Why did you make it so hard? Because we come in, and it's the nature of ego, and it's what we need to inhabit these bodies to be able to go on and make spiritual progress. But until we just keep overcoming, these tendencies, it is very challenging. So we shouldn't be hard on ourselves. We have to just keep affirming, though, that we are not going to we're not going to sit back quietly, calmly, and allow ourselves to be drawn into that energy, that we are going to be continuously saying to ourselves, what is it that the soul wants? What is it to keep a spine straight and to consciously bring energy up? What is it to say right in the midst of feeling hurt and being treated unfairly? You know, when people really do those things, I mean, that projection of feeling, of course, poor Barry's not here to defend himself, but there you go, I get to have the mic for the moment. You know, when somebody is actually maybe a little angry because I haven't been busy for a month, now I'm getting busier. I've been home constantly together, just the two of us. Suddenly I'm going out more. He could always wake me up at night. Now he can't. So the projection of that irritation, and projection's a real thing. We all do it. We all do it. We feel something, but we're not quite conscious of it, and we literally project it onto the other person, frequently our spouses, frequently. There doesn't happen to be a spouse around. We can do with our children or our parents or a best friend, but a spouse is a perfect target, and it happens a lot. And it's in those moments where the truth is we're being treated unfairly. We are. And yet, where does that get us? What does it mean? What are we interested in? Do we want to be right, or do we want to be making spiritual progress? So when Swamiji says, don't get caught with what's going on in here, put your energy out towards others. What would be loving for that person right now? Because in that act of loving, we open our hearts. That's why it was so lovely. I just realized that I forgot the music tonight. Sai Ganesh is sitting here. There was none of this going on. Well, we'll let it go for tonight then. It would be disruptive at this moment to go back, but something I just said reminded me. Anyway, sorry about that. That's because my brain kicked in during my meditation. But that door of my heart open wide I keep for thee. That's how God comes to us. So, and how else will God come to us but through the summation of our experiences in this light, the effort that we spend. So it's easy to want to be right, again, because it's the nature of human condition. It is to be drawn to ego, to be drawn down, to fight the battle, to be reactive. It's so understandable, and yet it doesn't get us anywhere. I mean, ever. The interesting thing is, even those people who aren't even having a nod towards wanting to make spiritual progress, so they're just living in the world totally unconsciously and loving it, many of them, probably making their own progress wherever, there's no mistakes, wherever they're meant to be. I don't want to sound judgmental or demeaning. I don't feel that. But here we are trying to make spiritual progress. But even if we're not, or even in moments where we forget, we don't get anywhere with those arguments. We don't get anywhere. Even emotionally, we don't feel better. When we're not projecting our energy and our attention, this might sound contradictory, by the way, because we're always saying, draw energy in and bring it up the spine. And of course, that's the truth. But what Swamiji means here is don't be egoically self-involved. He means don't do that. He means bring the energy up to your heart and consciously and thoughtfully choose to love other people, to be respectful, even when in the moment that they're hurting you. When you think about great saints, all of the great saints, look at the ways that they were treated. Look at what happened to Saint Teresa of Avila. I mean, she was put to trial. Even when she was saying that she was experiencing Jesus beyond form, they would have been, if it was a different moment in life, they would have been ready to burn her at the stake for that. Fortunately, one of her spiritual mentors came and saved her with that, because he said, I've heard this can happen. He himself had never had the example. I mean, St. John of the Cross, I read that even on his deathbed, the person who was so accusing him was right there speaking to his nurses, whatever that meant in those days, but his nurses trying to get information to still use against him. I mean, we don't have to look back that far. Look at what happened, I mean, not that far, 2,000 years ago, Jesus, 1,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, not even 1,000 years ago, 800 years ago, St. Francis, with people throwing stones. I mean, never mind crucifying them, it doesn't get much worse than that, but throwing stones at Francis all the time and throwing garbage at him. Look at what's happened to these people, and then look at the life of Master and Swamiji. I mean, look at the ways that they were abused. When I think of Swamiji, I think I said this last week, did I? I could be having a deja vu or I said it. But people making up all of those lies about him, such slander. But we can look right at Master and Swamiji, though we can look at all the other saints too. They never got angry. They never got angry. They never wanted to hurt anybody, ever. There was no emotional reaction. Saint by saint by saint, they are our examples of opening our hearts and letting that love just flow through. I mean, what greater testimony to that is there than forgive them? They know not what they do. Imagine that. You are literally nailed to a cross. We forget that. We look at so many pictures and we read so many stories, but that was pretty brutal. And he was just saying to God, forgive them. It's so remarkable. So when Patanjali or Swamiji or all of our other teachers is saying, constantly raise your energy, constantly feel compassion. Ask yourself, what is this other person going through? How can I love them? I never know. I have to find this out. I think Swamiji said this, and not Master. The vehicle is blessed by that which flows through it. It's so telling when you repeat it consciously. Whatever flows through us, whatever we are putting out into the world, we're either blessed with that or we're cursed with it. So giving, holding people up in high regard, compassion, forgiveness in these moments, just instantaneous forgiveness. It's better if there's nothing to forgive. I read a wonderful story. I don't know if I'll get it all right because it popped into my mind. If I knew I was going to tell it, I would have read it again. But it's a story about the great Saint Brigu. And he, I think, was thought of as being one of, if not the greatest saint ever, but he was held like that. And somehow the story, you see me trying to grab it, pull it back up, he was looking for the most humble person that he could find. And he came across Krishna, but Krishna was asleep. And so Brigu, the story goes, obviously this story is for us, I doubt this is a real story, but he started kicking Krishna to wake him up, just kicking him. And the instant Krishna woke up, he said, "Oh, did you hurt your foot?" Can you imagine that? There's the story. You're being kicked, you're being mistreated. In the story, Brigu, he didn't gently go and say, "Awake, my saint, awake." He started kicking him. Krishna wakes up and grabs his foot. "Did you hurt your foot?" It's such a touching story. I had a personal experience, not like that, but an experience that's important and that it's good for me to retell it and to remember and for others to hear. there was an experience happening. I'm going to be consciously, thoughtfully vague, where there was kind of a battle going on between a couple of groups of people. This is in Ananda, so we're all brothers and sisters, and you sort of know everything will end, at least karmically, perfectly. It has to. Might take a few lives, but it will end that way. But anyway, this battle was going on, and I was sort of on a particular side of the battle, but it was hurting my heart very much. So I was being a bit of the spokesperson for, but there are brothers and sisters. But anyway, this was all happening. And I was up at the village at one point when this was going on, some years ago. And I ran into a few of the supposed enemies. And I just saw their pain. I saw their pain literally in passing. Literally, I'm telling this part of the story, it's true. And it hurt my heart so much. My only thought was that these people are suffering. These are my brothers and sisters, and they're suffering. And I made it a point to seek most of them out and to go to them and tell them that I loved them and that I hadn't forgotten that they were my brother or my sister, and even to remind them of experiences or moments where we were together in love, with no argument, no disagreement. Disagreement's a good word, a better word. But I couldn't bear to feel their pain. It's not a Krishna waking up and just grabbing the foot, but it was an ability to see somebody else's pain just in that moment over my own. And again, like all of those moments of grace, because that's what it is. Again, that's why Swamiji even wrote these secrets books, because it's so easy to be human. It's just so easy to react rather than to act out of love. And again, compassion with gratitude. And again, forgiveness comes after. But if that's the best we can do, we've reacted, and then we can get to a place of forgiveness, that's a step in the right direction. All of those uplifting, soulfully uplifting qualities move us closer and closer in the direction that we want to be going. All of them. And I think so often these great saints have the lives they have where they look so human to us. It's hard to hold Christ like that because, that was 2,000 years ago, and we just have too many images of him. But we can look at Francis, St. Francis, who, as the story goes, the first many times God called to him, he wasn't clear about what was being asked of him. He had to keep approximating it. He had to get closer and closer until he could be reading all of what was being shown to him with spiritual eyes, or in Christ's word, to have the ears to hear. Otherwise, he was trying to read these stories with human eyes. And that's where so many of us are. But, as I was listening to the talk from last week, and I was talking about practicing these things, practicing or getting ready to say to ourselves, the next time, whatever, it's easy with our partners because one of the things you'll notice, everybody knows this, at least if you've been together long enough to notice, it might take 5 years. Maybe for the first 5 years, you actually still think if you explain yourself well enough, they'll get it. That's what we think. But 5 years, 10 years, 15 years in, you realize you're always arguing about the same things. It is pretty much true. It's rare that, even if the circumstances are a little different, the essence, because what we're arguing about are where our ego's bruised, where we're actually being egoic. And the ego, this is hard for me, that's hard for me. So it's not what's going on outside of ourselves. It's anything that comes in that lands right there. There's no logic to it. It's a totally irrational reaction. This is why we keep fighting about the same things. So, because it's not the things out there, it's exactly the places that we need to grow in. Exactly those. There's no mistakes here. We're perfectly placed with our family, with our partners, with our siblings, with circumstances, to be able to use the opportunity. So Swamiji gives it to us in secrets. He says, practice allowing your energy to flow outward with love. I'm saying, give yourself reminders. The next time I want to say, you hurt my feelings. The next time I'm even thinking, because I never said that to Barry today, by the way. I didn't. I knew that wasn't going to get us anywhere. But it was in my head. I was saying to myself, that's really hurting my feelings. And like a little girl, I started crying. It's so crazy in a way, but it's not crazy. Crazy is a cheap way of not looking at it. It's real. It means, look at that. I still have that place, where Patanjali would say, everyone in the world's going to hurt me. Of course they will, because it's not everyone in the world, it's me. Consciousness is all that matters. So if we say to ourselves, the next time this clue comes in, or that clue, or here's a trigger for me, I'm going to remember, and I'm going to say to myself, do not react. Take a moment. Raise your energy. Open your heart. He's hurting. How about, this is the foot that hurts. Oh, did you hurt your foot? Are you hurting right now? Did you need something from me last night that I didn't give you? And why not care about that? I'm so sorry I couldn't be there for you last night. Now, that wasn't exactly going to work today because he wasn't exactly owning that was the issue yet. But we'll get there. I'll be able to say to him, wasn't there for you last night, and I'm sorry. And of course, I am sorry. I'm very sorry. I would always want to be there for him. And this is another important point. When would you not want to be treating other people well? Our behavior, our actions, how we hold truth, even in a moment, it is who we become. It is. And as we're becoming in this soul's journey, so I could say to myself, I get that I didn't want to be awake last night. Really wasn't a good night for me to be awake. But it is also true that I'm so sorry I couldn't be there for him. I love him. I'm sorry anytime I couldn't be there for anybody in the world. That's really the truth. I always want to be there for anybody in need under any circumstance. So we're not telling a lie. We're not being dishonest. We're being our highest, our biggest selves. It's the reason we learn affirmations on this path. Of course I'm sorry I couldn't be there for you. You know, so in any circumstance, we can get with the other person and love them. Doesn't mean we give in to every one of their demands, because then we start meeting them where they are. Not good. But to genuinely love them where they are is what allows energy to flow, not just out to them, but up for ourselves. So you can't go wrong with this. You can never make a mistake by offering spiritual love, God's love, not human love. It's so imperfect, human love. It doesn't come anywhere near the way God loves us. The way God loves us. We can't even fathom it. And it's a very important distinction to make right now. Otherwise, we just become enablers. That's not the point. The point is to love them with your heart, with your mind, with your soul. To love in that way. And every time you can do it, you're growing spiritually. You're expanding. And you definitely don't feel hurt anymore. So most of the day today, I didn't feel hurt. I didn't, because I understood he was doing the best he could do, and he certainly was not out to hurt me. He loves me as much as I love him. He never wants to hurt me. So hold on to it, because probably your next fight or your next bit of hurt feelings with someone somewhere, not that far away. I wanted to just share with you, I'll close with this and then we'll have a few minutes for questions. This is something that Swamiji said in his Christmas message the year of one of the trials that was going on with SRF. I'm sure many of you know a lot about those trials, but this was right in the midst of the Bertolucci trial. It was the part, no, not the part, a part of those trials that was completely personal, not for Swamiji, not inside of him, but at him. It was such a slice at his character. I mean, just different than suing over publications or names, or this was very different, the Bertolucci trial. All by way of saying it could have been, and I'm sure in moments was, excruciatingly painful. But listen to what his Christmas message was. He wrote, "We have so much to be grateful for. I wouldn't trade anything God has given us this year for some imaginary better deal." Even that, just hear that, some imaginary better deal. Even like as if it would have been better if I awakened and Barry wasn't feeling angst with me. That can't be true. It's what happened happened. Even something as minor as that. But here's Swamiji, who's being about as badly treated as we can imagine. He said, "Spiritual growth comes as much through divine tests as through overt blessings. So much so that I'm inclined to say, what tests? What we want from life is to grow closer to God. Nothing else, absolutely nothing else," Swamiji says. I'm reading his words, so I'm looking at you. "Matters. Speaking for myself, and I think for all of you, my love for him is deeper than ever. So also is my faith." There you have it. What a beautiful commentary on if you want to be happy in this world, nothing and no one can make you unhappy. And if you want to be sad, nothing and no one can make you happy. It's all within. We have that choice to choose. It's such a great lesson and the beauty of these last 2 weeks together. So let me ask, Sai Ganesh can field these questions. If anybody has any questions, just, pardon me, unmute yourself and ask the question, and I probably won't hear it, but Sai Ganesh will tell me what it is. No questions? Okay. I'm going to ask every week, or every 2 weeks, every time we're together, but great. Okay, dear friends, it was so wonderful being with you together tonight, even though I know it's just it's an illusion, but I feel better in this body tonight, and I feel lighter. So anyway, great, great joy being with you. God bless you all.